Yeah, and now I can go live on YouTube. Yeah, here we are. So we are happy to meet here. Hello, Game Jammers. Hello, Game Jam researchers. So together we, Annakaisa Kultima, Finland, Foaad Khosmood, United States, and Oleksii Izvalov, Ukraine, we gathered together for a live chat, like a webinar, where we can discuss how to do research on game jams. So let's say first a few words about ourselves. Maybe Annakaisa, introduce yourself, Foaad and me.
Yeah, so my name is Annakaisa Kultima, and I've been a game researcher since 2005. That's one way of counting it. And I am a doctor in game studies. I can doctorate things, anything to do with games in academia. A lot of my research has been about game jams. So I guess my first paper on game jams is from 2010. I guess the year when we did our first global game jam in Tampere,
Finland.
which is two hours away from Helsinki, where I live now. And Helsinki being the capital of Finland, if anybody is wondering if Finland even exists, we do exist. We exist very close to the neighbor that is not the nicest neighbor, as Oleksii is aware of. Nevertheless, so I've done lots of different kinds of things with game jam, so not just research. But I think that the jam that we're running in our course now is or that is going to happen in March, is going to be my 51st jam that I'm somehow participating as an organizer, jammer, or judge, or whatever. So I guess, yeah, I've been there from early days, and it's fantastic community to be with. So yeah, that was a really random introduction, but yeah, hey, my name is AK. Yeah, I'm like that gun, but not that old. I don't know if that joke is appropriate anymore. Yeah.
Hi, should I go next?
Yes, yes, please, Foaad.
All right, so my name is Foaad Khosmood. I am a professor of computer science here in the US at Cal Poly. And I got started with game jams back when we were part of ICGJ. And I was I was a grad student over at UC Santa Cruz, and UC Santa Cruz kind of established one of the first large scale kind of research programs in games. And that was happening in the early 2000s, and it finally sort of kicked off around 2005 or 6, something like that. And it coincided with me being a grad student there. So I was involved in games research, games activities and everything, and did some game jams, and then got involved with Global Game Jam, which had its first year in 2009. And I was kind of just recruited by Susan and was told to do all kinds of impossible work. And so it was crazy. I mean, it probably directly affected my graduation year delay for about a year doing Global Game Jam, but it was really exciting. We had really good energy in 2009 when we did the first Global Game Jam. And then so we stayed with it, and we formed a nonprofit later on, and we had some really good people who had experience in Europe doing game jams, people like Gorm, Annakaisa, everybody who came along. Like just within a few years, we had a core group of like really, exciting volunteers and enthusiasts, and it was great. It was a very very fun activity, and so that's my start with game jams. And then now that I'm a professor, I also teach game design, and I encourage my students to go to game jams. I advise a club that is a game design club, and they do game jams. So I just think there's so many good qualities for game jams. There's so many benefits for students to participate. One of the things that this is kind of a technical school where I'm at, and a lot of people basically get hired in Silicon Valley. I mean, or at least they used to as of a month ago. I don't know what happens now. But at that time, people would get hired all the time, and the resumes are really difficult to differentiate because it's just words on paper. And so it really helps if you have a portfolio. It's not necessarily for games, but it really helps for games if you have your own portfolio. And there's no better way to create a portfolio than to go to game jams. And instantly you can have a portfolio, basically. 1 or 2 games, every game jam you're going that you can be a part of that's going to be listed, it's online. And that's one of the first things that we wanted to make sure that there is a record of your participation in Global Game Jam. And I'm glad we did it, because now there is all these games on there. So anyway, so that's where I'm at now. I'm kind of retired from the board of directors of Global Game Jam, but still very much involved and enthusiastic about the movement.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I founded in 2013 together with others. We founded the Finnish Game Jam organization. But 2020, I got a kid, so I stepped down and handed to the next generation. So yeah, talking about the retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's so nice.
I had no gray hairs when I first started.
It's all because of game jams.
Yeah, it's mostly because of
I double that. Yes, that's totally true. And so, as for me, I'm Oleksii Izvalov. I'm PhD in technical studies. It's called automation of control processes. So, for my PhD research, I developed a training system and models for the air traffic controller simulator. So what my PhD supervisor told me, so in fact, air traffic control simulator is also a game. So I was also always eager to make games, strategy games, simulator games. But it appeared that at the time in 2010, when I was working for my PhD, the main direction was automation, and right now this is the first year when I teach game development. So my dream is coming true. So besides programming, besides object-oriented programming, databases, so right now in the Economical and Technology Institute of Robert Elvorti in Kropivnitsky, I teach game development. So it's for me, it's like a dream coming true. It's in the process. So I also tend to involve my students, not only the students who study game design, but also the students from other specialties to game jams, because well, on game jams you get things to do for any profession. You can be artist, you can be programmer, you can be even a copywriter, you can be a promoter or manager. So all these roles work together, and I'm happy to be the regional coordinator for Global Game Jam in Ukraine. So I see several GGJ UA viewers from here. So доброго вечера, glad to see you. And we've gathered together to make this stream for the upcoming scientific conference on game jams. So it appears for someone it can be a surprise that game jams, besides just making games, besides a valuable addition to your portfolio, they can be food for scientific thought. So, and as it was a surprise for me in 2016, when right after the first Global Game Jam Ukraine we organized, I read news that Foaad established the scientific conference. First edition was in Berkeley, as far as I remember, yeah? So, yeah, could you please tell about this, Foaad, how this started?
Well, honestly, it wasn't us who started research on game jams. Annakaisa and others were actually doing this before we did the conference. But we actually, even years before the conference, we had workshops in different conferences. So for those of you who don't know, there is this conference system is kind of how things get published. And I'm from computer science, and a lot of what we're doing in ICGJ is kind of computer science centric, but I don't want to emphasize that too much, because really it doesn't have anything to do with computer science, what we're doing here. So in conferences in general, especially in computer science, there are workshops, and that's usually reserved for things that are like cutting edge or just like a very small community, right? And we definitely qualified, very small community. Alan Fowler and other people, Johanna Perker and others, we got together and we did these workshops in various conferences, mainly FDG, but also others. And in these workshops, we all had a consistent group of 10, 15 people would come up. Annakaisa was there from the beginning, and then we decided, okay, I think the next level is to have our own conference. And we're kind of like, we're maybe a large workshop, but then we wanted to make a small conference, a one-day conference. So we just, I think Alan really started the whole thing. We did it in 2014, the first one, and then we did it in Berkeley, and from there it was great. People came. Now, it wasn't the best location because it was coinciding with. We did it because it was at the same weekend as GDC, but it wasn't in San Francisco, so people had to come all the way to Berkeley, and there was no public transportation because welcome to America, and so it was very difficult to actually get there. So next year we learned our lesson.
It was fine. It was fine. Fun. It was fantastic to go to Berkeley.
Okay.
At least for me.
Yeah. Okay.
How I left my cellular phone at the conference. So the next day I had to take BART via the San Francisco Bay to take the phone back and then return to the conference. Yeah, and it was on time.
Yeah. So yeah, we got really good enthusiasm from people who were there. It was obvious that there was a market. There was a group of scholars who wanted to continue talking about game jams, and it was great. So we just continued it year after year. We had we went fully online, of course, when the COVID happened, and we basically took last year off. But now we're back, and in 2023 we hope to have another great conference. And so later I hope we get into, I don't want to talk too much right now, but later I hope we get into how to write a paper and what kind of papers would be great for ICGJ.
Yeah, and so this was a great meeting with you. And for Annakaisa, I met you even earlier at Helsinki conference in the beginning of 2016. Yeah, so you wrote a PhD on game design praxeology, and I'm also proud to have a copy gifted by you. What did you research about game development, game design? Yes, I have my nearby. I will show it. Yeah, so Annakaisa, what research connected to game development did you do in your PhD research?
So it's a kind of so in game studies, the larger community of studying games, one of the conference, for instance, Foundations of Digital Games. Was that the name? I guess it was correct.
FDG. Yeah.
FDG. So it's one of those conferences where people that are interested in games from one angle to another come together and write about different things, present their research. Then there is DGRA, so Digital Game Research Association's conference, and a couple of others where there's like a vast collection of different topics that people write about. But a lot of them, for instance, are about analyzing certain games or understanding players, or maybe sometimes understanding algorithms behind digital games, or artificial intelligence, like FDG is also known of. So when I started my game research in 2005 or so, it was kind of difficult to understand how games are made, because it wasn't like obvious to me, at least. And there isn't still today that much of studies, academic studies. There are books about game design process, but there isn't that much of studies of how games are actually made. And my book is a 10-year ethnography with game developers of their own kind of experiences of how games are made from their perspective. So how they think that the games are made. So I took like a 10-year journey of interviewing people, doing sub-studies of different sorts, and then kind of came up together with this thesis of different things about the reality of game development, mostly in the Western, like a global West, so to speak. and emphasis in Nordic countries because I'm from there. Game jams come to picture when we, to some extent, might think that, and to some extent it also works, that game jams are accelerated game development processes. So also from the researcher's perspective, it is an interesting format when we can see that what happens when there's nothing first, and then there's an idea, and then there's development. At the end, there is a published game. So it can model to some extent how games are made or what happens in game making. So yeah, there's a lot to share from that 10-year study, but maybe in a nutshell, it's my book is about kind of a manifest how we should study more of the creative process of making games.
Excellent. I hope to get a copy signed by you at some point.
I can send you one.
Okay. Would love to. Would love to. Tell me where I can PayPal or something. Yeah. So yeah, I just found some pictures from that first year. I thought, maybe we could share.
That was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. There's so many challenges that we had to overcome to do this, but it worked out. And so yeah, I mean, the first year it was just very difficult to anticipate what kind of papers you would get, and what, it's already difficult enough in conferences. There's a big debate about how to even evaluate papers and how to do rejection and things like that. And so for this brand new interdisciplinary, it's not quite game design, it's not computer science, it's not activity recreation management, it's somewhere, has a little bit of everything. It has art, it has design, it has software engineering. I think is one of the best angles, actually, because software engineering is all about how to do rapid prototyping, or some of it is it's a big part in software engineering. And in my opinion, it's a great place to learn about rapid prototyping and prototype management. So yeah, so that was one of the most difficult things, is to try to understand where we are. And I think this debate is not over, because it's kind of it's an ongoing learning experience. But at least we've found lots of examples now that the kind of papers that work well. And one thing I want to emphasize is that normally in computer science, or a lot of sciences, papers tend to be like a hypothesis proving paper, that you just here is what I want to say, and here's the data that shows that I've succeeded. There you are. Annakaisa, excellent. Who is that gentleman behind you?
That's Timo.
Timo, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Timo Nummenmaa. Yeah.
Yeah.
We presented a paper about a game jam experiment in the 2016, 2016, about when we didn't have any electricity or internet connection during the global game jam.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that was a great paper, and that's what I was kind of talking about. That's an example of, it doesn't have to be like a scientific hypothesis proving paper. It has to be something that contributes some knowledge, some new ideas, and some experience, I think, to the community. So that's the attitude I think that we need to have for ICGJ papers. And if there's something that you think others could learn from, that is worth writing a paper, in my opinion. And so don't be discouraged about it being like computer science or anything like that. It's not at all like a regular computer science kind of a venue. It's just you can write papers about art, you can write papers about design, and then you just it could be DIGRA, like it could be a paper that works well in DIGRA, it could be a paper that works well in AAAI. It all is good. Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, so much great reminiscence of those
Everybody
days.
looks so young.
Yeah, yes, it was like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels like 2 years ago, to be honest, but that's how life
we
goes.
can say hello to our viewers. Yeah, Abnor Quiros Clemente, hello. Tarja Porca Kontori, yeah, hello. Glad to see you on the chat. And we have also additional discussion in Telegram as well. Yeah, so this is what it is. The game jams provide a vast field for research. So we can share the suggestions. For example, we can share the call for paper for ICGJ 23, and we have topics.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so, for example, communication skills, community building, creativity. This is for. I just want to show our viewers that regardless of what field you are majoring and regardless of what field you are doing your PhD research, you can find something interesting on game jams to do research. For example, for social studies, communication skills, obviously community building. For computer science, well, obviously the tools, the algorithms, the game hackathons per se, ideations at game jams. It's also for how ideas created and how the process is set up. So just to make the scientific research and description of these processes. History of game creation. Right now we have a very solid history, and we need historians because so many events there were already. So about the rapid game development. So this is for computer science. Fits perfectly. Group dynamics. So games done quick, game design issues. So specifically for game design. So and yes.
Let me interject one thing, Oleksii. One of the things I really like, I mean, you mentioned PhD research, but I want to correct you that it's not just PhD research, because there is a lot of master's students, and in fact, I even had undergrad students who have collaborated papers with me. So the field is so new and exciting that really it's really easy to get into it. And that's what I really want to encourage scholars who may be doing, may have done other things. It's like doing game jam work is actually, because it's kind of ground level, it's still relatively early. There is maybe less than 50 papers total that have been published about it. So there is so much to get into. And it helps if you do your evaluation by actually convening a game jam yourself, and then doing a survey or doing some kind of an observation during a game jam. It doesn't have to be that way, but that is a really easy way to do it. So it could be done during Global Game Jam. It could be done another small jam. And again, because the field is so new, even a small set of numbers like, n equals 20 or 30, something like that, actually works pretty well, because that's new knowledge that we didn't have before. So so you could have like a question in mind about, how, if we do this, how would that change communication? If we use this tool, how would that affect development? If we use, this kind of a technique, would that be better for group dynamics? That kind of thing. And then you can observe that, and then you could have some results about it. Everyone's interested because people are constantly trying to find better ways of doing this. And also, we're not really commercialized or anything yet. Everything is very sort of non-profit at the moment, Global Game Jam and all that stuff. But there is a lot of interest from industry, because industry has a lot of interest in hackathons, because they want to see new ideas and new kind of like development techniques. And same actually goes for game jams as well. For example, if one tool works better than another, and that could help you later on when you're designing a big AAA project, and you could definitively say that this actually works better than the other one, and so on. This actually is worth a lot of money and a lot of interest from the industry. So there is industry involvement, very small way right now, but I think there's going to be more of that.
Oh, yes, definitely. For example, one of my friends with whom I connected on this conference is Brett Hill, and we are proud to have him in the judges of Global Game Jam Ukraine. And his position is hackathon and game jam consultant at Intel, at Boeing, at other companies. Yeah, so that's definitely a commercial perspective for scientific research.
Exactly.
I think I published a paper. I can't remember where did I publish that. Was it ICGJ? Maybe. Things go so fast, but I've made a claim. Yeah, I think it was last ICGJ, but it was such a kind of long time ago now that we've had a long break, that the kind of generation of game jammers have also impacted the realities of the commercial game making. So before I started with game jams and we were interested and we did a lot of industry collaboration in our research projects, there was much more talk about how there were like rapid prototyping, or there were workshops, or they were kind of creating prototypes with certain kinds of methodologies, and nobody were talking about game jams. But it has become like a household name for those kind of experiments, the pre-production phase type of activities, and they can be completely internal. So it has become such a kind of widespread word, game jams, since whatever 2006 onwards, 2002. Where do we start counting? I guess the zero year is the indie game jam. But nevertheless, so for instance, Epic Games is making a claim that Fortnite was born in an internal game jam. So that's sort of velocity of this topic has grown into highly impactful, and we don't know what people are talking about when they talk about game jams. We don't even know what people are talking about when they talk about global game jam, because nobody has the complete overview of how things are done in different places. So I would, on top of what Foaad was kind of recommending people to think about, that what could be valid research, I'm a huge proponent of descriptive studies. So it doesn't necessarily have to be causality that you're tracking. So like, if we change something, what would happen? So what are the causalities of processes or tools? What is their impact? But the ICGJ really needs a full body of a kind of documented processes, documented game jams and other game creation events, so that we would understand the difference between the events from one location and the community another. So it's not just country based. So when I've been regional organizer for Global Game Jam in Finland, and we had a bus jam experiment where we went through a couple of like maybe 5 different Global Game Jam sites within one weekend with a bus and jamming ourselves in the bus. I realized that like the things that I was assuming that game jams are, and the participants that we gathered together from different sites, that they were assuming that the game jam is, it wasn't that. So the game jam as a format is so kind of flexible, and nobody's defining it, nobody is owning that word. So it can mean quite a lot of different things. And what I'm also assuming, that we don't know what is the black box of Fortnite's creation, but it's part of their official story. So the jam thing is quite big thing these days. It just doesn't, we can't even say, I know that there are papers that claim that hackathons and game jams are different, but they don't necessarily are. So it depends a lot on the local communities, like city-based communities even, or even like within the city, there might be a different community that thinks about hackathons or game jams differently. So that is very, very valuable work to do, that you document your own experiments, your own events, and then share it to others. So I've enjoyed, for instance, papers about, for instance, one thing that is constantly in my mind is a big team game jam. And it was in 2016, if I remember correctly, in ICGJ. There's a paper about how to make how it was to make a game jam with a very big team, which is not typical experience. For instance, in the Northern European game making countries, we have very small companies often and small productions. So we don't have the AAA type of hundreds of people in one production, that many. So game jams can be interesting places for that. And then somebody, I guess in the same event or later, was also like, no, that was later. There was a case about escape room game jam. Nobody knew about it in my community. So there's so many different kinds of interesting different game jams. And if you think that you've done a game jam that differs from what you've seen before, that can be a very, very valuable contribution.
Yeah, we want to know about it. We want to document, as you said, Annakaisa. It's not all about showing causality. We want to see all the different ways that game jams can happen and what takeaways we could take from them.
Speaking about game jams,
it is also called research because think about history. It's
of course
it's just documenting communities, for instance. Yeah.
About game jams versus hackathons, I remember the very first conference. There was a position paper by Lindsay Grace. And we can tell our viewers that another way to publish is a position paper, like with argumenting pro and contra, what is the current discussion in the community, and use it, for example, to use or not to use the prizes for game jams. What prizes on the game jams can be? Should it judge and be on the game jams? There are so many open questions which need position paper, and will be also your scientific research, scientific paper on those matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So Oleksii, I assume I'm getting some feedback now. I assume you're watching for any questions that people might have. So if there is any questions, please interject and
yes, I'm checking the chats now. So one question which always emerges by the practitioners, by the just game jammers or game developers about the scientific conference is such question as acceptance rate. So we know that papers, some papers are accepted to the conference, some papers are not accepted to the conference. So one of the missions for our current webinar and maybe upcoming if we have some time, but first this, that how to write a paper so to make sure that it will be accepted. So what can we say about this?
Write a good paper.
Yes.
Annakaisa was the chair before, she could say it.
At least write a paper that others can understand. I mean, often like that it's finished, because we also sometimes we get papers that people didn't think through, they didn't have time. So prepare time for you to write it before deadline, so that it can become a thought that you were thinking. We know for sure that happens a lot, that we might run late with the schedules. But I think that the good way to ensure that your paper fits to the conference is to look at the previous papers. That I guess this tip goes to any publishing venues in academia, is to kind of benchmark it. Is like, is your way of talking about this thing in line? Does it talk the same language? Is there similar references used so that we can understand what is it about? So we are also humans that do the reviews. We've read many of the previous papers. We know what's been written in game jams before. There are some more popular references or frameworks that we might understand. If it's very foreign, for instance, a medical paper or something, it might be difficult for us to understand the language of it. So I think that the best possible way to get in is to understand the language that we're already using, and then to look at that. For instance, these kind of things that I want to write about are not written yet. So I think first and foremost is communicability of the paper, so that people can understand it. Then it is about the topic and the fit to the conference, because these are easy to reject, that this is just not in our area, that it doesn't discuss with the previous research, it doesn't really work with this field, it might be interesting in somewhere else. And then comes the kind of the quality, for instance, that whether you've done a research that has enough people that you've interviewed, or if it has the valuable contribution to the previous theories or assumptions or thoughts or causalities or tools or whatever is kind of developed here. So that comes maybe sometimes the last thing. So if your paper is a readable thing and it ties into our tradition of, we already have a tradition, it's been a while. So if it ties into those discussions, it has much higher chances to get in, because we are building a certain kind of body of knowledge, even though we wouldn't be completely aware of the directions where we're heading for. it's a community of us that do the reviews of those papers. But I guess a little bit of layman-y way of giving tips, but maybe you guys, Foaad and Oleksii, can chime in. What
that was great.
What are the yeah.
That was great. Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, the best thing is to, just like any conference, you want to get into any conference, the best thing to do is to read the papers that have already been published at that conference. And so this is a bigger debate that's happening like on Twitter and everywhere about like acceptance at conferences and all that. It's a struggle with every conference, and the nature of should we even reject anything and so on. Well, I mean, without getting into the bigger debate, we have an obligation to ACM not to have 100% acceptance. So we have to have some rejection for that. And then there's also the other issue is that we usually just have one day, and you can't have 30 papers in one day. So it has to be, sort of, we also have an obligation to our audience to show them a good program of things that are innovative, things that are new. And so, yeah, I totally underline what Annakaisa said. Read the previous papers, become familiar with the language. I apologize to non-English speakers because it is very much biased towards English. That's another bigger problem in academia. It's very much English centric. So it does help if you have English skills that are at the level of a scientific conference. And so read the papers, become familiar, have very good references, because references are kind of telling us, because we are, it's such an interdisciplinary thing that a lot of it we don't know. But we like to follow the references and find out if there is support for what you're saying, and examples of other things that have done, or methods that you're using that other people have documented, and so on. So good references, make sure that you read previous papers, have a good level of communication, not just in the English language, but also just breaking it down logically for people who are reading it. Just imagine someone who is a smart person, but not in your area, not doing what you're doing exactly, wants to understand, and how would you break it down for that person? So besides reading the papers over at ACM, which we've linked here for you, there is also a link to the last ICGJ conference we had, which was in 2021 in the middle of pandemic. It was all online. So there's actually talks for the papers that were accepted there. So you can go look at those videos as well. Some of the videos that people consented to be there are there. There was a few other videos that people just wanted for the conference, and then afterwards we took it down. But there's a few there that you can look at as well.
Oh yeah, this is great and up to the point. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I want to add something. So one thing that I like, and oftentimes when I also kind of adding to Foaad saying that it doesn't have to be a PhD students. It can be also postdoctoral researchers or professors that write here. So we are welcoming all of that. But one thing that I am hugely a fan of, and I oftentimes supervise my students, whether they're PhD students or master's students, is that in academia you are not building up an anticipation of results. You are giving them all away on your first abstract. So if you're not able to put that in 200 words on the first page, the first sentences that the people read, then you don't necessarily know yourself what you're writing about. You need to be able to be concise with that abstract and give it away immediately. And that's like the landing kind of a room of your contribution. And it's not even always so easily done by even seniors. So just that's a very important part of your paper, that it is able to say that in this paper we're doing this, and the results were this, and blah blah blah, and that's it.
And I want to add to our viewers that Annakaisa owns an award. It seems to be there were several awards for different years for the best paper for ICGJ. And so please listen to these words.
I believe she has the majority
I
of
have
awards.
I have the previous
Right.
years.
Yes, yes.
So
Yes.
like these are fun to have on your wall. So if you're able to get into the conference and just be brave with your contribution, you might be. So yeah, the 2 decades of game jams, I was just part of it, so I can't really claim it to myself. But this was from the short paper, the negative game jam experiences. So that's kind of
nice.
so you can also write the
Yeah.
short paper if you don't think that your contribution is super kind of massive, but you have something a little bit to add to the body of knowledge. Just consider to write the shorter paper. I don't know if you have it. Do you still have the short paper track as well?
Do we have that this year?
Yes, we have this, and we have 3 tracks this year. I will move to that tab. So we have full papers 6 to 8 pages long, short papers no more than 4 pages, and Game Jam and Hackathon event reports. So
Yes.
this is the 3rd track, which is also useful and valuable for the scientific community.
Yeah, I so want to emphasize what Annakaisa said about being about giving the takeaway in your abstract, in the first paragraph in your abstract. A lot of people, Annakaisa, I think you know from students who just want to write like a novel, like you want to build up anticipation and be like, I did all this work and it was so hard and it looked like I was giving up, but then I found the courage to finish it and so on. And it's not that. It's really not about that. No, it's you can talk about the journey in the paper, but please give the destination right away.
It's a very boring thing. I understand a lot of students like kind of don't like it firsthand, but once they have to read like hundreds of papers, they start to realize, why do we want that? We don't want to waste our time if it's not relevant for us to read further. So we're not consuming stories. It's not our pastime. We want to know for sure if we need to read this in more details. So it's like it's an advertising of that paper. Like the title is the first advertising, and then the second is the abstract, and then the abstract is sort of like repeated in the conclusion, but it's a little bit different to conclude the entire paper. But nevertheless, like this is the one of the things that also it does improve the acceptance rate of your contributions, because people will be primed with that thing, and then you just repeat the thing with details. So it's a good thing to understand that as a genre of writing, it's a different thing. It's a boring genre. You spoil the surprise immediately. In this game, there is a surprise in the end, which is this spoiler alert.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
About getting access to the previous papers, we can tell our viewers that it's possible to contact the authors directly if it's difficult to get via your university network, if your university network doesn't have access to those scientific proceedings. And this advice applies to any field of study, any conference.
That's right. That's right.
And to contact, yes.
Oleksii, Leah, let me add that there's been this long dialogue with ACM, because, as you know, many other fields have open publications, so that there's no paywalls behind it. You know, like health, for example, and medical papers like that. The computer science community, which is ACM is a part of, hasn't yet gone there, but a few years ago there was a big movement to basically abandon for pay publications, and the publishers, they kind of came back and said, okay, we will be very lax with enforcing papers being posted elsewhere, because before that they were kind of like saying, no, you can't post this, you can't. And so any of the authors have the right to legally post their own papers on their own websites with ACM. So they will be there. If you look at if you search for it in Google Scholar, if there is, the PDF is available somewhere else, they would have it there. But also, as Oleksii said, you can just email the authors and get a copy too. So yeah, you don't have to be restricted with the ACM version that's here.
Also, we have comments. So, Guillermo Sanchez, saludos desde Cuba, saludos. And Prestige Gamer, that's called ludology. Yes, exactly. So, from ludum, like ludum dare, also Latin word, give me a game. And so, do I need to set up a DOI account? There's a question for publication.
Well, when you publish at a venue like ACM Digital Library, every paper automatically gets its own DOI. You don't have to do it. The only thing you might do is set up a what is that called? What am I thinking? The ORCID. You can set up an ORCID account, and it would just keep track of your publications. It's not even necessary. It's not 100% necessary, but a lot of scholars have it. So you can go to orcid.com and it's available there, or cid.org. But no, you don't need to set up your own DOI. The DOI will be there because it's part of ACM Digital Library. So after your paper is accepted, they will generate that for you, and it'll live on in the ACM Digital Library.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Foaad.
No problem.
Okay. So for more questions and comments, we can just think of some papers which come to our mind, some examples, some like in Game Jam we have diversifiers which push the creativity, and in Game Jam conference we have diversifiers, just ideas to where to build on which to build on your current research. So one paper that comes to mind, it was 2017 or 2018 by Johanna Pirker, and it was Foaad, yeah, about the connections between the jammers after the jam. So the methods of graph analysis was used, and how well the community get connected after the jam.
But I think the one I collaborated on was during Global Game Jam, and it was connections. But the funny thing is that one of the kind of unexpected results was that there aren't that many connections, because during the jam you're just at the time all the jams were physical. This was before COVID, and so it was just the people in your area, and then one of the interesting things I think we saw, that a lot of music people who are writing music for game jams, like they had the most connections because they were basically supplying like 7 or 8 different games in their local area with music, with soundtracks, stuff like that. But yeah, there wasn't actually as much. This was simply because it was very physical. Now, we didn't have a good method to track like 6 months later, but I think that's an excellent area to get into, because we do know that this happens. Game jam games get worked on later and they get published because we have so many examples of it. And I dropped in the Indicate 2017 talk that we were asked to give, and it had some very innovative games that later went on to be published. And there's a list at Global Game Jam of games that have been published. So we know people get together afterwards, but how does this happen? To what, where do people meet each other? What is the nature of the collaboration afterwards? I think this is worth studying. And I would be very, very interested in, collaborating with somebody for something like that, because I think it's great.
Yeah, that's cool. And Annakaisa, I remember your paper, you already mentioned this negative experience from Game Jam. First, it was very, maybe brave to say that, like we all say, oh, Game Jams are wonderful, but you were the first to think, what were the negative experience of Game Jams? How did this idea come to you, and what's possible to further research in this direction?
I think there's a lot of research that is happening in game jams. There's one PhD student in Tampere who's doing an entire dissertation about this. There is a research project in the University of Tampere about game jams and educational things. So that's kind of her area. And then there's already full PhDs. So there's kind of ideas of, for instance, how to make sure that people have positive experiences have been floating around for a long time. And for the idea of this short paper came from a person that was working in a project in Tampere, when there was a seminar that had a call for a little bit like a darker side of play. And I was thinking that, well, game jams could be one of those places where we also have, and we know anecdotally that there's been also bad experiences, but it's not that much discussed. And my short paper is just a really scratch on the surface. There's so much more stories that could be negative. With the experience of running so many jams, I often kind of encourage in my opening talks that it doesn't matter if this experience that you have today is not optimal to you. There are other game jams, and then maybe the next game jam is better. Maybe your team is just not the best for you this time. We've tried to figure out how to also battle these things. So we've collected feedback for over the years since 2010, when we started Global Game Jam in Finland. So we already know that there has been also negative experiences. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to get to the negative experiences of people that never even got to the game jams. So one of the papers that I think that Riikka, the one that I was referring to, making a PhD fully on the educational games, like she was writing about the kind of that why people don't participate game jams, and that's also very valuable. So you don't always have to have the sample within a game jam. It can be the things that are in around the game jam or hackathon or other game creation events that defined these borders. But yeah, it's a very small study in the end, and I hope that somebody takes that topic into a deeper end and can kind of also go to other, because a lot of my study is about the Finnish community of game jammers, so it's definitely different than somewhere like for instance, let's say Japan or even in Norway. So like our border neighbor, or even in Sweden, I guess they are both equally far but close. So there is a value in looking at these things that define the whole experience. And interestingly, a lot of these kind of negative experiences that I was able to get in my survey study, they revolve around the ambition level. So people get too ambitious, so they don't get the best out of the jam, or someone in the team becomes too ambitious and then they're toxic towards the other. So interestingly, I was able to get the both sides, not just the kind of that there was a toxic person in the team, because there's a lot of the jam experiences, if they're not solo jams, they are of course about being with those people and communicating. And it doesn't always, like humans are difficult to be with. So that's interesting, that people learn that they should be more aware of their goals and the kind of ways of jamming, and how that event fits to their own likings, because not all of us are into, for instance, these kind of rapid making cultures or putting pressure on themselves. So some people thrive under the pressure, but some people don't. And I think it's very interesting when we look outside Global Game Jam, which is around 48 hours, there is a whole movement of 1 month jam. So it's becoming maybe even more typical to have a 1 month long jams than to have the couple of days jams, or even the shorter ones. So it's very interesting to witness that there is slow jam movement, or we are in the era of slow jams now. So it's not all kind of accelerated with time. They can be accelerated with the constraints, or creating together for a certain cause, for instance.
Oh, yes, yes. So, and the current shift from offline to online and now return into offline can provide vast field for study for the upcoming conference.
Yeah, there's a huge kind of a critique towards also method of game jams. And I think that some part of that critique has a base, but some part of that doesn't really understand the method and the kind of vastness of game jams. So the crunch culture critique is often turned towards game jams. And this is one of the things that I defended in my dissertation when my opponent was asking about the crunch culture, whether we in Finland are actually pushing the culture of crunch. And interestingly, on our sites that we were running, we were not doing too much of facilitation of this, but the kind of experience that the jammers had on previous jams were building towards better sustainable working cultures. And the reason for that was that they realized that they don't work well with no sleep. So within a few years of experience of our jammers, this was on their own doing. So this was not a normative from us organizers. This was their own doings. They started to build a culture where they made sure that no matter how fun it is, the first night is totally no kind of staying up late. So everybody was like taking it seriously. They were treating their own bodies, giving a good night of sleep. They didn't want to eat pizza at some point anymore. They didn't want to have Coke. There's like they took it so seriously here in Finland. They were there to make games, and their bodies were their vessels for making the optimal process. So they kind of realized that within that short time, you understand the value of time, and then you understand how your body can work within that time. So it can be even a like an antidote towards crunch culture.
Oh,
because
yes.
a lot of the stuff in crunch culture is just bad time management. But the better aware of you are of your time boxing, if we can use the Scrum word here, the better you become kind of avoiding this type of, if it comes from self-exploitation, for instance, if it comes from your own saying in a more democratic work environment, which is exactly the context of the northern like Nordic countries, because of our work laws. For instance, we have unions, we have lots of like actual very strict rules what you can do for the workers. So we definitely don't have the similar kind of exploitative culture of the North American game companies. So it's interesting that within the very good setup of the culture of work, the jammers didn't turn into crunch culture. They turned against it. So it's not straightforward how the relationship between game jams and crunch culture works. It has to have a context as well.
Yes. So we can add there is show a book of I will start presenting again. I just wanted to switch to the screen. Yeah. So besides conferences, our viewers can feel free to check the books, for example, Game Jams, History, Technology, and Organization. Do you recognize the authors? And there is a chapter about dark side of Game Jams, and it's published by Springer. So I know, so all the scientists, scholars, I know they have a dream to be published by Springer.
I think if you click on it, you might see the table of contents. We can go through the chapters.
Yes.
And Annakaisa contributed to several chapters.
Yes. Let's.
No, I think it's that same one. If you just click on it and then scroll down, click on the picture.
No, I mean it just shows me the yes, we've got it.
Right.
So by editors Alan Fowler, and he's from New Zealand, Foaad Khosmood, and then we have the content.
Yes, if you can see the
acknowledgements, yes.
I still don't have a copy. They haven't sent me a copy even.
And Annakaisa, yes. We have so many people who have met at the Game Jam conference.
Oh, why isn't there a table of contents? That's really kind.
It should be. Yes, it is here. Yeah, so Annakaisa Kultima, and there is no one way to jam. Game Jam organization, Game Jam resources.
Yeah, dark side down there towards the end.
Dark side of Game Jams. Yes. The spread of Game Jam. So it will be very useful for Game Jam researchers to see
and
what.
I sincerely apologize for that obscene price. I had nothing to do with it. This is just all publishers, but there is an e-version that's much cheaper, so I totally recommend that.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, so yeah, see, this is
Yes.
from ICGJ.
That's one of the awards, yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
Oh
oh,
my God, you
2018
picked that
here is
photo.
stated.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
think this is also to understand that this is not like fully academic book. This is for anyone to read if you're interested on our thoughts about this. It's putting together different kinds of lines of thoughts and kind of trajectories within the field. But it's not also exhaustive. So that's one of the things that we battled in this book, that there's so much that there's so little that we can cover because we are not aware of all the stuff that happens around the game jams, and things will be outdated soon because of the new stuff that will happen. But it is a good overview of things if you're interested from the perspective of academics or from the perspective of organizers and participants, maybe even educators that use game jams as a format. So it's a good thing
I can
to check.
also briefly share my experience of our submission for ICGJ. It was in 2017. At that time, we connected Ukraine to two events, two worldwide events. It was Global Game Jam and NASA SpaceX Hackathon. So we organized them at the same location with a time difference of a few months. And we've got experience which we decided to summarize and made an article named in the article comparison of game creation and engineering hackathons on the global and local level. So we compare NASA SpaceX Challenge and Global Game Jam. How do locations work? How are the winners selected, if they are selected at all? So how the information is spread, how the challenges are presented. And by the way, one part of NASA Space Apps was very useful, was very interesting for the participants. That they usually start building attention to the hackathon several weeks before the theme is announced. And it is really great that this year Global Game Jam has also accepted this technique for the preparation week of Global Game Jam and to build awareness, to warm up the community before the announcement of the theme. So we have so much positive feedback on this feature for Global Game Jam as well.
Yeah, thank you for that contribution, because it made a huge difference. Now Global Game Jam is following it.
Oh yeah, so we are happy to, and it's also nice to see that the paper, when you write your paper, it's nice to see that people cite this, people view this. So just like when you are making games, when you see comments, when you see game downloads, and the same works for game research papers. So we can show the important dates for the conference, yeah, to see, and in the meanwhile, I will check the chats. So
yeah, I think so. This may look like it's coming right up, and it is. It's only less than 2 months, but that's plenty of time to write a good paper. I myself have worked on less time than that for write papers in ICGJ, especially if you already have an event between now and the deadline that you can study, that you can look at, or there's other kind of design or practice kind of papers that you want to submit. So I think if this was like a high-end, I don't know, NeurIPS or something like that, like a big AI conference or something, this would not be enough time to write a paper, because it's very competitive there. But this is a brand new field, and we are very welcoming of new ideas. So I think there is enough time for you to submit something if you're interested. And again, go ahead and read the papers from before, write people if you want to ask some more things about it. This will be really cool. One of the other things I wanted to mention is that we kind of briefly talked about it, is that we have this new kind of submission called the event report. And as far as I know, nobody really had anything like that before, at least in ACM. And so event reports are all about the thing Annakaisa talked about, which is to say, what is new about the way you're running a game jam, or like some particular activity. And that could be very valuable, very interesting, especially if you put pictures in. I personally like pictures of, I saw a lot of pictures of crazy places. Annakaisa had game jams and spas and, no electricity and things like that. It was a lot of fun. And things like that will be really valuable as well. So think about that. If you have a unusual kind of game jam or a hackathon that has been convened, we'd love to know what your experience was like.
Yeah, and I guess, like, for instance, the research papers can still be about reporting a setting. If you have another agenda, for instance, the survival mode game jam that we were actually looking at game design constraints with the help of the setting of game jam. But I guess, like, if you're thinking about the report, what is different? So my understanding is that it doesn't necessarily have to have a sort of like a research question and not like a backing of literature of that, but you can concentrate on actually laying out all the details of the event and then what you learned from doing that, and maybe like implications for others, how to do it better, or something like a little bit post-mortem type of writing. But I guess if you're not the big reader of the papers, so that could be a good format for you to concentrate on just telling what you have done.
Yeah, so
I have an idea, Oleksii.
Yes.
I wonder if we can give some paper ideas for people to.
Yes, I think we should definitely do this. So we have got two comments, one comment, one question. So Prestige Gamer said, I think a week is good enough for game jams. So I totally agree. You see, from my story of game jam involvement, I started making games on Flash during that golden age of web games. And at the time, we didn't call this game jams. We just call this contest on game creation. And we got 1 week, one or two people, a programmer plus artist, and we had time to make a game and upload it to Congregate and Newgrounds. And we have a question. You even started answering it right now. So Diego Rodriguez, hello from Peru. I'm unsure if you covered it already, but want to ask if the Game Jam event report needs to have the same format as the full or short papers. Thanks. So
format in terms of a template, or format in terms of, I mean, it is written in the same template, but I guess like it doesn't have to have a research premise.
Yeah, it's a slightly different, the format of it, the physical format of it. We experimented with different formats in the past, I should say. That it didn't used to be the same template, but we found that it's best with the same template. But it's just like it in a slightly different place where you're coming from, really.
I guess, like, I'm not sure, Foaad, you can say, but the way that I understand this is that we want to encourage people to tell about the new jams if they don't think it as they don't have a researcher mind they're not necessarily even researchers that write these papers. They just want to share. But I as a kind of a more on the humanist side, as a design researcher that comes from a background of philosophy, I would say that it's full research paper. If you have a research question in your setup and you still kind of, for instance, you want to do the descriptive study of Northern American game jam scene, and you just want to document the different sites and how they differ, or where they came from, or what's the history. That is definitely research papers. That's a full paper from my perspective.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, any other humanities or DIGRA type research papers counts.
Yeah. So, but if you are within our community of global game jam organizers, and you've done other game jams, like we know a little bit more about global game jam, but we don't know about interesting local game jams. For instance, we ran a game jam with sports people. That would be super interesting. Like, how did you combine different groups of people, for like non-game makers? So maybe you ran a game jam for elderly people. I don't think we've seen that paper yet, but why? That's like to come. I think that somebody will do it at some point. So these kind of like showcasing of the borders and different ways of thinking. I would love to see also papers about, for instance, the non-jam movement. So the kind of attitudes and and the kind of ponderings of why people don't participate to game jams at all, or they don't like the format, or they reject it, because there is that movement within the game jam movement also. And I think it's rising, because you can see that when it's becoming a household thing, and a lot of educations, they put, like a lot of game educations also put it as a kind of core to the education tracks. There is also a rejection culture for that, because it doesn't fit for everybody. So that would be super valuable to know how it works on the like, we are not the believers of the method. We are sort of like, we have come together because we think that there's very interesting things happening with this, but we are not non-critical. So we want to see criticism, and we want to see the different kinds of and the fallbacks of the whole thing, so that we can also make it better. So yeah, that's like, I have tons of other ideas. So I'm not sure if you, Oleksii, if you want to structure this kind of a paper idea.
So yes, about the paper idea, we can just give some our views. So we have also Ingrid Mendes. Hello to all. I'm from Brazil, so hello Ingrid. And in Brazil, we have a great network of global game jam locations. It's great to see you here, Ingrid. And my friend Bruno Campagnolo de Paula from Curitiba. I met him at ICGJ conference, and he's running research there. Yeah, so we can suggest our views, ideas. Well, I'll pick the low-hanging fruit, and I will say AI at game jams. I expect to have at least 5 papers this year about this. So because
ChatGPT.
AI.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's very trendy.
I experimented with our students last Thursday when we had higher danger of missile attacks. We were working from home, and we started experimenting with ChatGPT just to give ChatGPT question about game, then its suggestions and parts of code, decided to put it in Godot, then looked how it worked. Well, it can be interesting even for practitioners, of course, and with an additional layer of thought for scientific community. But obviously, it's not how to use AI in game development, and it will be automatically a scientific research. So we tell our viewers that please read the structure, find what you are going to prove. Think of this beforehand. What is your hypothesis? What was your approach? And like Annakaisa said, put everything right before in the abstract. So you are not writing a Sherlock Holmes story which grasps the reader's attention to the end. So in scientific paper, you have to write, give away everything in the abstract and go on.
Absolutely. All right. So I have an idea. I'm actually very interested in this. It came up briefly about the good length for a game jam, and somebody in the chat mentioned 1 week. And I have a hypothesis that if your game jam is too long, then it becomes like a chore. So if it's like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, in your mind, you're thinking, oh no, it's like something I have to work on. And one of the reasons I personally like 48 hours is because it's like, it's one weekend. I know it's over after that weekend. I don't have to think about it anymore, and it never becomes too much of a chore. So I'd like to know if we can maybe make some scientific inquiries about how many people think it's a chore, or if you have 2 weeks or 3 weeks, at one point it becomes like just one more thing you have to do every day, and it kind of loses the dynamism of having, you know, a very short, intense experience, you know, which I know has some downsides too. So that's something that if I had time and willing students, I would work on.
And how to roll on this topic, the researcher might be interested to reach out to jam organizers, for example, on itch.io, classify these jams by length, get information how many people signed up and how many people finally provided the solution, build graphs, all those nice looking graphs which get such a scientific flavor to this the research paper. Yes.
It would be nice to see if someone does topic that would look at the kind of length, would also look at the different kind of types of people, that so that it's not like a majority vote, because we come in different sizes and packages, and we have different ways of living. Some people don't like intensity. Some people enjoy, including myself. I think that's why we are kind of geared towards this method, is that I like to work intensely and then take a break. But it doesn't work for everybody. So remarkably, there are also people that find it nicer when they can have a digestible, smaller slots. And I think that some earliest things that have happened that are not necessarily always counted as game jams is, for instance, one a game in a month experiment. A lot of indie developers of certain age have been part of. So it was considered very short at the time, because a lot of the game development for consoles and PCs were like years and years of development. So that was very short. Now I've seen a claim that somebody has done a 10-minute game jam, and with the current low-code tools, for instance, or any tools that have a kind of a fast onboarding process, that's very much possibility. Like make a game in 10 minutes with Bitsy is absolutely possible. At certain time, we thought that it's just 1 hour that is like the shortest time. So and if you look at it, they're a little bit jokey, I guess, but I don't know how serious they are. So there's a 1,000-year jam that is also listed there. So I don't know what that means. So it would be really nice to understand what that means. Why is there these kind of different experiments within the whole community? From my perspective, it would be super nice and very useful for the entire community of game jam researchers is to understand the local traditions. So it's very difficult to understand whether the Finnish game jam tradition is same as the Brazil game jam tradition or not, because there is not that much documentation of all these different cultures. So that would be really good. And in general, to be more aware when you do game jam research, is that you would position your study into a locale, because none of us are actually people on the internet. We have our local cultures to some extent, often where we have more internet people these days. But I mean, there is at least subculture within your internet communities that none of us have a really global view of things. So whatever you do, whatever kind of study you do, it's very important that you make it more visible that where do you draw this from. And I know this is a little bit bungent, I guess, note towards the people in the country where Foaad is at, is that Americans are very notorious of thinking that they know everything in the world. So they make generalizations more than the others, us here in Europe, for instance. But we also make very nasty generalizations of the global West. And we disregard everything that happens on the eastern side from Finland, for instance. So Russia. Now it's okay to kind of disregard Russia, but Chinese game jam scene, there are some research that's been done on the global game jam side, for instance, in China, Hong Kong. And then, Korean game jammers, what is it in Vietnam, African countries, Japan is still a little bit of a black box for me. So we don't know anything about these in our body of knowledge. In the end, we know actually very, very, very little. So the more we can know about the differences between different communities, or just we don't know, we can't yet know the differences, but we should be aware of the communities around the globe.
Yes, and we should encourage more geographically diverse researchers to submit to the ICGJ.
And at least what you can do, if you are if you're submitting your research paper from Canada or United States or UK, just be sure that that's always mentioned, because it's a little bit annoying as a reviewer to kind of remind that this is not a global research that you did. It's almost impossible to make some generalizations with the body of knowledge that we have, and especially even if the sample would be 100 American jammers, absolutely not generalizable.
Yes,
it would have to be so much more global sample, because it's a global phenomenon, it's not a local phenomenon, you know. So that's a really, really, really important, but also sometimes really, really hard to remember that the world doesn't revolve around ourselves.
Yes. So we have 39,000 game jammers this year at Global Game Jam at 800 locations in the world, and such a big potential for growth and such a big potential for scientific research. Also, just one more idea just came to my mind. There was a paper about motivation at game jams. Maybe it was yours. Yes, I remember. It's what motivates people to jam. And we can narrow it down. How can prizes at game jam motivate, or on the contrary, turn people away from the jams? This is a very open question, a very important question. So our viewers might consider this as a research.
And for these kind of studies, you need to understand that there's already some papers about the motivation of jammers. I think at Foaad and others, you collected the data from the Global Game Jam for a long time, like as a global survey. So that's been there, like what are the main motivations. There's also motivations of the organizers, why people were organizing these jams. So it would be good to tie these, because we do need more study on that. What comes to the competition, I would be also interested to see if there's if gender, for instance, impacts this, because at least on a certain kind of a layman's level, we think that females might not be that into competitive events, and then it might be gearing towards the gender bias if it's super competitive. But obviously it's not easy to generalize, but it has also this kind of a gender issue or inclusivity issue altogether, with all the genders and kind of all the different kinds of people. So not everybody is motivated in general about competitive places. So that's one thing.
Yes, definitely. So all this should be covered, and we hope and really hope that the ICGJ 2023 will take place on the 30th of August. So please take into account the conference dates, conference submission dates. We can write, so by 9th of May it should be the submission deadline. So you've got the whole March, the whole April to produce the paper. So please take into account our suggestions to provide a good conference paper. And please join our Game Jam research community. We are always happy to meet you.
Okay.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Oleksii and Annakaisa. This was great.
Nice
thank you, Annakaisa. Thank you, Foaad. It was really great to meet you.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Have to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.